a strange land, never done nobody wrong. The sun goes black, the earth does shake. Hold your tears when I am dead and gone. This sour wine you offer me, it takes away my pain and it makes my body numb. Between two thieves, a head hanging low. Forgive them for they know not what they've done. Cavalry, a cavalry, take me in and shelter me. My immortal home, you'll be your cavalry, my home. Cavalry, cavalry, open up your gates to me. You can have my body, but my soul flies free. Your cavalry, my home. They built a highway up overhead. The cement trucks they spin while the motors roll away. Once was a time. Thank you for coming. Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH New Haven's home for community radio. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Mayor Toni Hart makes New Haven tick morning and night. This morning, she's in the WNHH studio for her weekly Mayor Monday checkup and what she and we are up to in the Elm City. Good morning, Mayor Hart. Thanks for stopping by.
Good morning, Paul. How you doing?
It's always great to start the week with you, especially when it's as nice a day as today.
It's gorgeous.
I felt like outside I just wanted to bottle it. Honestly, I didn't want to come inside. It was just too nice. But I'm glad we have a good day. A day not to complain about the weather. Maybe complain about other things. We'll see what kind of questions we get. If you have a question for the mayor, feel free to pop it to us via Facebook Live. Here's what you do, folks. You go to the New Haven Independent Facebook page. You'll see the video right there. You'll be watching us talking radio for the eyes. You can put your question right there. Station manager Harry Jost will be funneling them to us. And thanks to Gateway Community College, Birch & Moses PC, for providing financial support for today's program. Mayor Harp, how's the beginning of freshman year going?
Well, you know, it's beginning what freshman year.
You're back at school, and I'm jealous. You're in Waukegan.
That's right. Yeah.
Last week you weren't here.
Yeah.
You weren't playing hooky. You were actually going to school. You were at the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Program with 40 mayors across the country.
Yeah.
And according to what I read, you're hanging out with some Harvard faculty and, quote, renowned management experts for, I guess, a year-long periodic session of learning how to manage cities better and share ideas. Is that accurate?
Well, it is. It was really a wonderful experience. I learned a lot, and the idea that it will continue throughout the year is I think really important, because oftentimes you go to these meetings and there are, you know, things that happen one time and you never get a chance to sort of implement what you've learned and then get feedback on how you've learned it.
So you went there for 3 days.
Yes.
Is that going to be every few months you go there for 3 days?
No, I think they're actually going to use technology. So once every 3 months, we're going to be in our offices, and they will see us. We won't see them and our other members, but we'll be on. I don't know if you've been over to SOM. They have that sort of setup where you can call in and be electronically in the room. And
why don't you get to see
teachers.
them?
Well, because you're on screen.
So it sounds a bit like Apple when they kind of spy on you, know? No, just kidding. Do you get back in a room ever again with these other 40 mayors?
I'm not really sure. I know that I believe for the next until the very end, we're doing it virtually.
But you were in person for these 3 days.
We were.
Where was it?
It was in New York City, and it was in two places. It was in the Bloomberg Building in New York City.
Where is that? Manhattan?
It's Manhattan. It's I think it's 731 or 713 Lexington.
Oh, okay. So it's downtown.
And then also Bloomberg Philanthropy.
Well, that sounds really fun. I was a little jealous when I read about it. Sort of that kind of wonk heaven. So, where were the mayors from of the 40 cities? Were they all over the country, our region?
Oh, yes, and some all over the world. We had a mayor from our sister city in Freetown, Sierra Leone was there.
Oh, very cool.
We had a mayor from Quito, Ecuador, who was there, and from Sao Paulo, Brazil. We had about 3 or 4 of them from the United Kingdom there. And then we had Charlotte, North Carolina. We had Atlanta, Georgia, St. Paul, Minnesota, Richmond, Virginia, Seattle, Washington, and just all over the place. Yeah.
I would imagine a lot of the mayors are grappling with the issues you are in cities right now as we have the effects of federal government defunding going to state government defunding rolling down to cities, or is that not true?
Well, I think that I don't think they're experiencing it as much as we are here in this state. To be honest, it didn't really come up in the way that it would come up if you had a meeting of mayors here
from Connecticut.
State, yeah.
So what was?
Hartford was there too.
Okay.
So 2 from Connecticut.
Did you have a new loose leaf notebook?
2 huge ones. Yeah.
Because I remember first day of school, I always felt optimistic when I went and got the 3-ring notebook and the paper.
Yeah.
And I wrote neatly for a day, for the first day and getting all excited, but then school got a little overwhelming and stuff being as, but it was anything like that?
It was, like we had homework to do. We had all these cases that we had to read every night and discuss, be prepared to discuss. It's really intense.
Sounds
it started at 7:15 every morning and then it went sometimes until 10 o'clock at night.
Well, I had hard enough time sitting through those long days of classes as a kid. I can't imagine.
Anyway. But sorry, I've got to say, those professors were extraordinary.
Government professors from Harvard?
Harvard, Kennedy School, and their business school as well. Extraordinary.
So you're working hard there. Can I ask you for an example of one case or one lesson that stuck out in your mind?
Well,
I always ask that question, like the one example.
Well, there was a guy named Professor Gantz, I guess, and why this was important to me as a politician. He started out as an organizer, and he organized, and the case was about basically his trajectory. He organized in the South during the student marches down there. He organized the farm marches, and he also helped to organize the people who worked for the Obama campaign. And so he talked about the importance of narrative, which ought to be of some interest to you, in helping people understand what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to understand the elements of narrative and how to sort of practice that. So we got to practice it.
And does that mean, for instance, like when you're dealing with controversy with the police department or a tax increase or making changes in benefits, that you need to be the person telling the story first to the public that frames the way we see it? Here's why we're doing it. Here's the act. Or is it more like you find people to tell story around, like a story of a human being, and that tells the story of the policy? The
most important story that you tell is your own story. That was the thing that we learned. And then you tell the story of how it relates to everyone else. So it's the me, it's the us. And then it's the now statement of, well, so what does all of this mean now in terms of that policy?
And by me, does me mean Tony Harp, the mayor? Like, I know when you ran for mayor, you told a very powerful story about your childhood and the iron lung. Or is it more like me, this is what I'm doing now as the mayor with this topic?
Well, it could be, it's more the me that relates to other people. So if this is a topic of, say, gun violence, which is one of the ones that I used, I told a story about being um, 8 years old and having to dance on Fridays with kids in my school. We learned square dancing, and then we finally got around to learning the two-step, which meant you had to have a partner. And there was I was the only black kid in the class, and there was only one boy that would ask me to dance
Oh,
because they
man.
made us. Yeah.
Ugh.
So it's like
I guess
it's
that's real life. Okay.
that's real life. And then what happened, like so
felt bad.
Fridays, he was accidentally killed, but because he got his grandfather's rifle, took it out to the
Oh, my goodness.
the barn, and he thought it was empty. And
At 8 years old.
At 8 years old.
Wow.
And so that was my first
And
experience.
how did you relate to? I mean, how did that affect you?
Oh, well, I remember his name. His name is Myron Hansen. I don't remember.
But how you feel at 8 years old when something traumatic happens, you're not always aware of what you're feeling.
You're not aware of what you. I mean, I was sad and hurt and devastated, really, and it for multiple reasons. Some kind of silly, but yes.
It's not silly.
And
you're talking about an 8-year-old kid.
And so when we talk, then we talk about move from that in the narrative to gun violence and how it affects all of our lives and how readily guns are available to people oftentimes without even knowing it. But we all care. None of us want to see an 8-year-old kid accidentally killed. And so you connect other people to the story. Then you say, but what can we do about it together? And so what I came up with is we do this gun buyback thing.
Mm-hmm.
We do. And this is getting all of the guns where there could be accidental deaths off of our streets. And so what I did was challenge all the mayors there to get guns, because you have to challenge people to do something, to get the guns off of their street by doing a gun buyback. And that it's relatively easy to do if you work with your local hospitals that have to care for all of these gun victims. And we've had a very great relationship with Yale New Haven Hospital. And what I asked them to do is to make a commitment to having a gun buyback before school starts.
All right. And did you tell them about how we also partner with Sword into Plowshares and we actually melt these guns down? You realize I'm out of my expertise area here. And then we turn them into gardening tools. I think that's incredible.
That's a good one too, yeah.
Well, it sounds like you had a good week.
But that's basically the format. And so you learn how to do that. And that your personal story, they say, sort of brings people, in and it gives people a sense of who you are. And that's one of the things that I think I don't do well. So
it was interesting when you ran for mayor, and I followed you for decades. When you took your acceptance speech in Democratic Convention, they wrote you a speech with you where you did that for the first time. You talked about the iron lung and some very powerful stories, but it's not your natural thing.
It's not my natural thing.
You don't do Oprah on the campaign trail.
No, and so that's one of the things I had to learn how to do.
I don't. Do you?
Well, no, but I've got to learn how. I think I should
you think you have to, or you just think you could take some of these lessons to just more personally communicate?
I think it's all about communication, and that communication is really important, and that it needs to be thought through.
Mm-hmm. And you're doing that communication here on Mayor Monday, and I do hear a lot of feedback that people actually do appreciate hearing you just talk every Monday about what you're up to and what you think about stuff, and I think you do a very nice job in this program.
Well, I think oftentimes people think they see you in one way, but until they really hear you talk about things, they don't really know. Sometimes I know I'm a little shy, and people can interpret that multiple ways. And
people interpret shyness, because I have that same thing in social settings, as arrogance.
Yes, exactly.
Like you think you're better than they are when you're really just kind of uncomfortable about how to talk to them.
Yes.
That's right.
So getting some skills in doing that is not a bad thing.
But you are communicating here on Mayor Monday, WNHH 103.5 FM. We have Bob, who likes to communicate with us by phone. Let me just get you up here, Bob. Bob, you're on the show. Thanks for calling. How you feeling this week, Bob?
Hello, Mayor. Hello, Paul. How are you?
Good. Hey. How are you,
Paul? Hear your voice again,
Paul,
Mayor.
Not Paul. Bob.
I'm hanging in there, Mayor.
I know. I hear some rattle in your voice.
Best I can do.
Okay.
Well, I'm always smiling and chuckling a little bit.
That's good.
But my first question is, and I'm sorry, I don't know if you've already talked about it, is about the latest round of the 36 or 37 layoffs in the city schools?
You know, I love they said 36, 37 because when we reported first as 36, we got that from a document with the teachers union. And then the city put out a press release that it was 37. And I went back to my reporter and I said, let's double check this fact. And he said it was 36, but we never actually got the real number. So I think subsequently people were writing about it as 3 dozen. That's how we do facts in the media.
Yeah.
Okay, how did we decide on who's going to be laid off? Why so many guidance counselors more than anybody else in the school system? Maybe you can answer those questions.
And Bob, thanks for that question.
I
Thank
have
you.
another one too.
Okay.
All right, man, sit tight.
All right.
Okay.
So Bob, one of the things that the superintendent thought was necessary was to reduce our workforce. And so, as you know, initially we looked at part-time positions and are sort of rethinking how that is going to be done. And then she has been working with and negotiating with New Haven Federation of Teachers. And they've been trying to, we have some open jobs that are available. And so they spend a lot of time trying to get people into those open jobs when there were match certifications. So this has been going on for quite some time. The 36 or 37 that are on the list were people where there just couldn't be matches made to existing jobs. Oftentimes, some of the teaching jobs that we have require an additional certification. So one of the reasons that guidance counselors were selected is that in looking at what the superintendent says is the national guidance for the number of guidance counselors that per student, she tells us that it's 250 students per guidance counselor, that we had more guidance counselors than fit that sort of rule. And so that's one of the reasons why we lost more guidance counselors than others. They are certified teachers. Some of them can, if they have the appropriate certifications, go back into the classroom. I'm afraid that the ones who are on the list were probably some of the early hires without certification to go into some of the other jobs that are open.
So Mayor Harp and Bob, we're talking about a $19 million deficit in the schools. So stuff's got to be cut. Stuff's got to be cut. People aren't going to like it because we wish we didn't have to cut positions, right? We wish we could have more guidance counselors and all that. I know that around 100 people's jobs were saved in consultation with the union.
Right.
And there were 6 librarians, 9 classroom teachers. There's been an emphasis in trying to prevent the cuts from touching too much into the classroom. One thing we're asking at the Independent as we cover this issue is when people don't like a cut, we do want to hear from you. We want everyone to speak up. But when you do, and you need to think about, we're asking people to think about what else you would do if you want to do that. Would you have your taxes go up? And instead of saying, cut the fat, cut the administrators, give us for instance, you want to not have people supervise principals. You don't want people to cut checks. These are tough decisions we got now, and we have to make choices, and none of them are good. For instance, guidance counselors, right? It's really hard to get good help for helping kids if they come from homes where their parents aren't savvy about how you get into college. Really, those counselors. I remember my kids were across, and they had about 5 minutes per kid, maybe in a semester, to really deal with them. And in our home, we knew how to get into college, and I actually thought they were really good guidance counselors. But that we live, or like the Cut the Project Pride program, you go camping. We think it's great to take kids camping, but if we're going to choose between taking teachers out of the classroom or camping, that's what we're going to choose. I mean, fair enough to say.
I think that's fair enough to say, and that the hope was, certainly, $20 million is a lot of money to solve for, and even with that, there still will be more cuts.
There's still $12 million to go, right? We're at $6.9 million.
That's what I understand, and that the expectation is that we will have to try to find that $12 million.
You really are in a position now where your mayoralty for now, a big part of it's going to be, in addition to celebrating a lot of progress in the city, we'll talk about that a little later, and a lot of that is going on in the city. You're going to be presiding over tough choices, right? I mean, you're aware of that, right? I mean, you're going to be making decisions that no matter what you do, the decisions you're going to have to make, some people aren't going to like it.
No, absolutely. And I know there are a lot of people who are very unhappy about almost anybody who gets laid off is
And they're
going
unhappy
to
if the
be
taxes go.
unhappy.
They're happy if the taxes go up. And again, I'm not putting this down. And they're happy if the taxes go up.
Yep.
And they're happy if you cut spending that affects them.
So I think that, so we have a lot of really poor choices. And, one of the things that we're seeing is that our number that we're solving for has gone down. I spoke briefly to our finance director, and it looks like it's down now to about a little over $11 million instead of the $15 million from last year that we're trying to.
You're talking about
to
the
close.
deficit.
The deficit.
And what made that change?
There were a number of things that that he had been waiting to actually put into the calculus, and hadn't done it until just now. But as he reran the numbers, I think the police numbers were a little higher than we thought in terms of their ability to have a balanced budget. We thought it would be they'd be about $2 million off, and like they're only 200,000 off. I mean, it's still not totally balanced.
I hear you.
But that saves us money. There was also a bit of savings in our medical that we projected it to be higher than it turns out to be. And we think that probably by the end of the month, remember I had said to you that it takes until around the middle to the end of August for us to really close the books to really see where we are. I think we're going to get really close to that 9.4 number that we were cut by the state. And
I love the way I learned that was the year we had the Call Adam phone call. That was in mid-August when Yale was holding back its money. That's a fun other story. Bob, did you have another question for Mayor Tony Hart? Bob, you still there? Okay, I guess not. Bob, thanks for calling in on Mayor Monday, 103.5 FM, live stream to New Haven Independent. You're listening to WNHH FM. So let's just get all the financial stuff out of the way. So last week, we got 2 bond rating downgrades.
right.
And Standard & Poor's in downgrading us said they thought that we have a structural deficit that's causing a real problem that's been caused by optimistic revenue projections for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, just what's your reaction to these downgrades, and what are we doing about closing the long-term structural deficit?
Well, I think that one of the things that, we're certainly not happy that we got the downgrade. And one of the things that we've done is to look at the governor's budget and make a decision about state revenue, because that's what they're talking about. That's where the optimism comes in. We're not optimistic about, we pretty much know what people are going to pay in terms of their property taxes here.
Most times we like optimism. So when it comes to conservative financial projections.
It's nice if your optimism actually materializes. And so when I construct the budget, I do it based upon the governor's proposed budget. And when I was in the legislature, we could always count on the legislature understanding that for those of us who do early budgets, that we use that number and we put that number in our budget. And for the past 2 years, and maybe we should have learned from the first year, it took this past budget year until October to come up with a number at all. It just has not been anything that we haven't gotten the number that the governor put in the budget, and we've used it. And so maybe we were optimistic this year because it didn't happen last year, to think that it would happen this year. But I think that we now understand we can't count on the governor's budget.
Right. And I've asked you this in other weeks. In terms of structural deficit, we've been asking our readers to weigh in on the tough choices. We're trying to write the articles in terms of not, well, here is what we lose and here's what we gain with these, least of poor choices. Whether you want to change minimum staffing in the fire department, change the way we do ambulances with the fire trucks, whether we want to try to get this 1% sales tax on entertainment, which could be at least $10 million a year conservatively.
Right.
Any thoughts at this point? Updates? I'm going to ask you this periodically. Any updates on structural deficit approaches?
Well, one of the things that we are, and I know people are unhappy about the 11% mill rate increase, but one of the things that I want to continually say that in New Haven you can live on a street, and 2 doors down from you, it'll be a Hamden address and not a New Haven address. And they're already paying 3 mills more than we are this year. And if you go over to West Haven, they're already paying 2 more mills this year than we are. So this whole discussion about taxes, some people have neighbors that are paying way more than they are. I guess Edge Hill Road is another place. So I just wanted to put that on the table, that you have people you can walk not even a block and they're paying way, way more. But if, in fact, one would agree that it's very difficult to cut the city side of the budget, that's the one that I have more responsibility on, without reducing services to such an extent that it will change the quality of life and could actually cost us more.
That's the question.
We've made such progress with crime in our city. People are asking us always to do more in terms of streets, sidewalks, those kinds of things. And I think that we've taken into consideration the fact that more of our calls in the fire department are for health care, and that I'm waiting for a proposal from our fire chief to see how he would change the minimum manning and who would be on the truck. But already we're putting, he's starting to put paramedics on the fire apparatus when we go out, so that will help, so that they're just not sitting around waiting.
He's going to be an interesting guy to watch, because Alston's really got the history and nuts and bolts of running fire departments. He gives advice other places about how to run a fire department. And you have a very strong fire union president who also really does his homework.
Oh, they both do.
They both do, and he's going to want to make sure that nothing gets cut. And it's like anything that's really going to adjust the deficit, I think we're going to see that play out. We're going to see
think that'll
tough
make a
choices
difference.
And tough. Now, I thought it was a very interesting interview. You did a very good article in the New Haven Register this weekend, an interview with Mary O'Leary about some of these budget issues, and I learned 2 things from that article. One is that you're looking at the hospital provider tax, which is the tax that hospitals pay to the state. They pay a lot of money to the state. I think they're the biggest taxpayer maybe in the state of New Haven. I could be wrong.
Probably are, yeah.
And you're looking to get 1% of that stream diverted to New Haven, which you say would cover more than that whole $30 million structural deficit. I'd never heard that before. Is that realistic? Will the state say, go ahead, take the money when they're so strapped?
I think that it's a reasonable request to make.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, they don't fund pilot. I'm just wondering.
And I don't know whether or not they will, but this all emanated from the governor's proposal
to start taxing hospitals. For real estate.
For real estate, and their point is you already tax us, and that cities should get a portion of that tax, because that's we're in the cities.
And we can't tax our property because they own that property.
Right. And so I think it's a good point to make. And so one of the things that we want to do is to have the conversation with our delegation, our state delegation, and to see whether or not it's something that they will support and champion. Because
do you see with the people running for governor, do you see that possible, or with the Republican gains at the legislature? I mean, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is...
Well, let's hope they don't. Let's hope they get as scared about the national Republicans in the state as I am, and they put Democrats
Fair
in
point.
there.
So this is the kind of idea that this election will be about.
Yeah.
And then the other point you brought up was you were going to ask the executive management people, meaning people who are not represented by a union, who got raises recently, some for the first time in 5 or 6 years.
Right.
People are very upset about that. So there's now taxpayers are going to get a $10 rebate. We're all going to have a big party, by the way. We're going to pull our 10 parties and have a big bonfire and get lots of marshmallows.
Do it on the green.
Show a movie. Anyway, so they're getting $10 rebates to kind of punish those departments for getting raises. I read in that article that in addition, you're asking those people to take furlough days.
Yes, we're going to demonstrate that it's not an impossible thing to do, but the executive and confidential employees are going to take a 2-day furlough.
Does that mean they all have to?
It's yes, I think we're going to do it.
And how much money will that save?
I'm not really certain that the overall dollar figure. What we want to do is to lead by example.
So to ask the other, I think the article said you're going to ask the other unions.
To do the same.
Now that doesn't really deal with structural deficit, correct? That's what you're doing. You're trying to close a one-time deficit.
Well, I think that what that does is, I think it helps us feel like we're all in this together. And one of the things that we put in our budget was some givebacks from the unions. Now, if they want to do something different to do a give back to get to the figure that we need, I think it's about $1.8 million.
For what?
For give backs.
All the unions together.
All the unions together. Then, we're open and receptive to anything they want to do. We thought the easiest way to handle it would be through furlough days.
Mm-hmm. Another question I have from reading that article now. So the Board of Alders passed this law or ordinance that said that any new money that comes in, this will have to go toward rebates to lowering the tax rate, right? Mid-year?
Yeah, but this money that the furlough days were built into the budget.
They were?
Yes, so it's already in the budget.
But
so
let's say Yale New Haven money came in. Does this tie your hands to be able to make decisions about lowering a deficit? Like, let's say you want to lower the deficit so our bond rating doesn't go down again. Will that law, let's say Yale gives you more money. Does that have to go toward lowering taxes instead of closing the deficit?
Well, I think that one of the things that people forget, that was a point in time. If we are able to get this through the new legislature that is seated in January,
that'll be for next year.
It'll be for the next budget year. So we're hoping that the current budget that we have with the tax increase will, and with our refinancing, will be sufficient. So, but we ultimately hope that the short of it is, yes, I'm sure that there's some that can go back to the people. But one of the things that I would hope that the people of New Haven would want is for us to have a fund balance or a rainy day fund that will help us get over these difficult times.
And it's been, I think, 10 years, 12 years since we really haven't adequately funded that rainy day fund.
We really haven't. And so I would argue that is one of the things that we've got to do.
So now you're hoping to do a lot of that by refinancing our debt. I think it's $160 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that.
Some of the criticisms of local governments and state governments is when you try to close a deficit by borrowing. So this is the second time we're doing that. Do you have concerns about that?
One of the things that people don't realize is that we are required to balance the budget somehow. So if we don't do that, then we would probably be raising taxes by 25%. So the real question is this not a way that is fair to homeowners and business property owners in our city? Mm-hmm. It will move our payment out 3 years. And so ultimately, I've decided that this is a fair way to do it.
All right. And we're fair to remind you that you're listening to Mayor Monday, WNHH FM. So I like to call it the cognitive dissonant moment in New Haven because I'm kind of a nerdy person. And meaning that, we're talking about government, these tough choices, and they're really painful.
They are. And
that we went through this in early 90s. And we're also dealing with this moment in time that we've never seen it. I think you haven't either, Tony, since you've been here, where just people want to build here and spend money in New Haven to build up our tax base and hire people and make it a lively. And, you weren't here last week. I was struck by the groundbreaking went to the week before that at Audubon Street.
Right.
So that's land that has been vacant for a long time, a surface parking lot. We've wanted for 40 years to extend the Arts District, which is a very successful place on Audubon Street. And here you have this company that has that and 3 other parts of land. They're from out of town, Spinnaker Company. Mm-hmm. They want to build, I learned that day, $250 million worth of new development in our city in those 4. $250 million. Now, I don't know a lot about money, but that's a lot.
It's a lot.
And no strings. Like nothing where we have to give them a tax break. And, and they're building there on a lot that's going to be upscale apartments and offices and stores. I'm not sure about the offices. Right across the street from a public housing tower. Mm-hmm. And down the street from middle-class condos. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's like we used to like dream about that stuff 5, 10, 15 years ago, how we get people to build like that in our city.
It all starts with a dream, Paul.
Bitsy Clark, that was her idea. That was so much fun seeing her in her late 80s with the shovel. And she's such a character. When she was saying, I was wondering when this damn lot was going to get filled in. But what I mean, why do you think that moment's happening in our city when, we have all this doom and gloom from the rating agencies and the fights about what we're going to cut, which they're never happy. And at the same time, every week just about, sometimes twice a week, we're breaking ground on these amazing projects.
Well, I think that one of the things that was really hard for me to wrap my head around. I mean, I always liked living in a city, but for years and years and years, people wanted to live in the suburbs. They thought that that you've made it when you live, 20 minutes away from
when
where
you don't see
work.
anybody.
Yeah, when you don't see anybody.
You made it when you're bored with the remote control trying to find some of the 99 channels of cable.
But I think that
no offense to other people in the
room. I think that with the way in which work has changed, and I've met people who they work for a big organization, but they don't go to an office anymore. They work from home, and so I think the question they ask themselves: do I want to be in a suburb where my neighbor is an acre away, or do I want to be? And most of these are young people, by the way. Or do I want to be in a place where that is intellectually stimulating, that has fun nightlife, that has interesting things to do on the weekends? And I think that this new generation of people who don't have to go to an office anymore say, well, if I've got to stay home and work, then where home is matters to me, and it's got to be interesting, vital, and a fun and place that stimulates me and helps me interact with other people. Because think about it, you could be at home, and not really interact. For many people, their social interaction happens at work. So if it no longer happens there, then it's going to happen in cities. So that's one thing. The other thing that someone brought to my attention is that there are so many young people who have so much debt from education that they can no longer afford to. It takes them a lot longer to afford to buy that house in the suburbs. And so they can't really buy, so they have to rent. They have good jobs.
It is striking how the only condo project on the horizon is the old Lehman Brothers, which is really going to be a test of that market.
Right.
And we have, Randy Salvador's apartments still going up. We got the 2 projects planned in Wooster Square. You got the Crown Street block, that 4-sided block that's filling all in with new apartments. So I got a leading question for you on this very subject. Okay, so one of the big projects they wanted to have built was Live, Work, Learn, Play at the old Coliseum site. That's been years. It was signed right before you became mayor. Yep. And then I was looking at some old FOI emails where a year ago, it's really sounded to me like both sides were preparing for it not happening, positioning for who's going to blame the other for violating their promises.
Yep.
So here's my leading question. Any new information from the developer of that project, from Montreal, the Live, Work, and Learn, Play people, about how that project's going?
So we met with them about a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, and interestingly, they wanted us to know that they hadn't given up on the project yet, that they were, but they would let us know in about 45 days whether or not it's a go, that they still thought that New Haven had all of the elements that interested them in the first place. They wanted us to know that their project was, because it was really building a community over there on that site, a hotel, places for people to live, retail, and all of that, was a far more difficult to find the financial partners for than they expected, and that they are working very hard on it. They haven't lost faith in New Haven, and that they are trying to still put it together.
Do they have a financial partner lined up?
Not that they would share with us.
Did they intimate?
They.
45 days. It sounds like someone's got to be in the works.
I think that they were not willing to say, but to say we're still interested, and you're going to be happy in 45 days.
Are you going to be? They said that. They said you're going to be happy in 45
That's
days.
basically what they said. Yeah.
And did they
And
use
then-
those words?
They didn't quite use those words. They felt that they were very close.
Okay, and
Those were the
getting a
words.
partner.
Yeah.
Now, what happens in 45 days if they don't have the partner?
I think that we will have to sit down with my economic team and figure out what we do. And as you pointed out, we were very close to saying, look, it's a wrap. This is some of the most important property in our city, and we've got to figure out a way to get a developer in here who can actually do it.
So can I opine for a minute and see if you agree with me?
Okay.
I'm going to take off the journalist role, put in the editorial reporter roles. I always thought this was a really interesting project.
Yeah.
We tore down the Coliseum. We designed the ultimate new urbanist vision, the thing everybody wants to build. I mean, it's true that Spinnaker also, some of his projects nobody objects to. But this was an ambitious project, originally $400 million, that got everyone to like it. Everyone liked what the plan was, to have all this like open space there, apartments, stores, different incomes, opportunities to build a small business. And I felt it might have been a little too good to be true. I talked to someone else who bid on that project. They said the reason we didn't win it and they won it is because they told everybody what they want to hear. But and actually someone told me this several years ago. There's no way they're going to get money for it. And that the market doesn't work. You can't always do what everybody wants to hear. And sometimes you have to let the market talk and find other ways, like right across the street where you're refinancing. The nice squares get refinanced. It's still going to have 40 to 60% affordable housing. But sometimes you got to let the market speak and then it'll get built.
Well, and I think the other thing that happened was that the market sort of started building up around the project, with the Randy Salvador project, with the Spinnaker project over here, and with the project down State Street. All of these projects that are doing very, very well. And so when they first came to the attention of the city of New Haven, they would have been the first.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And now they're not
Everything's
the
built up.
first.
Yeah.
Everything's built up around them. We've got the big Alexion building. The whole question of hotel days and whether or not you would be coming into a market that needed or didn't need it has been
because
solved.
we have 4 boutique hotels being built. I mean, Randy Salvador's thing's going up fast. So does that mean their project will no longer have a hotel?
No, it will. But
it will.
But you've shown the demand by what's going on.
I see.
Around.
Well, my other opine was going to be you can't just look at one piece of property. That developments always are complicated, especially in cities. They take years. Things change. And that if our city were relying on this development, it would be a big deal. And it's a big deal. It's a big piece of property. But so much other stuff has gone ahead fast around it that you can't just expect 3 things you didn't expect to get built to build. I mean, Webster Bank project's going ahead like in no time. Spinnaker went up in no time on Audubon Street. It's not realistic to expect every project's going to move ahead without a blip.
No, and one of the things that I've learned is that it takes years for some of these things, and especially if they're complicated, and
you want to get them right.
And you want to get them right, and so that's why I'm hopeful, because I think everybody did like it and would love to see that project there.
So 45 days, and then we're going to know whether they
45 days, we'll know.
Will it be a fight if they pull out? Because when I read those emails, it really looked like they were setting the groundwork of pointing fingers on these really obscure points of the.
It might be. I'm pretty sure that they will want. They've expended some resources to get us to the current place, and they would want us to.
I can't figure out why they can't make a killing just selling it. They've land banked that thing while everything got valuable all around it.
Yeah.
This is how little I know. I thought they would just sell this thing.
Yeah, I'm not certain that
way beyond my
they would be able to do that
expertise.
without the city.
And the other question someone asked me, so you have Church Street South, we're hoping to rebuild that. You got Long Wharf, you have an ambitious plan for.
Right.
We have across the train tracks 2 really interesting projects, at least one of which is going to go right away, and the other one looks soon, right on Union Street around there and Chapel.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be enough of a market for all this? Or do we just let it get built and the market shakes out? It might be middle-class housing instead of upscale housing, and that's fine.
Well, I think that I've asked that same question. I've said, gee, and are you displacing in some of our neighborhoods some of the housing that may not have been upscale, but they could charge higher rents? And my development people say, look, that's not a real problem to worry about, because even in the 80s when we did have all the condos and they didn't make it, they provided housing for a different market, and the city
I think
was
we
better
benefited.
off. Yeah,
Became affordable housing, actually.
yeah,
One or two became crack dens. Clean those up in Hemingway. But there's somebody built the one block. Remember Hemingway Avenue?
Yep,
Yeah, Hemingway Street. I mean, but anyway, we're talking about what goes up in the air. What about in the ground?
hmm
We are bioswale city.
yes.
So we just got an award. Speaking of, Harvard loves us. Besides sending you to school last week, they also gave us a national award for the bioswales, an environmental award for helping fighting climate change. We have 35 bioswales, and if you know what they are, they're those things that look like little flower beds, right?
Right.
You dig in the ground by the sidewalk. You put plants there. It absorbs a lot of water that would otherwise go in our sewer system, so it filters out a lot of pollution.
Right.
So we've gone bioswale crazy, and I mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
With 35 built, but we're building 275. And
Yeah.
URI, that's an outfit, the sort of Yale affiliated Farsi school, helps build them.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I think it's great. I think it's a phenomenal idea. They also work with Emerge, which
Right,
is
the
one
people
of
who build them, they're coming out of prison.
right.
Yeah, that's great. I always see them around.
And so I think it's a win-win for our city in so many ways. And we never finished the sewer separation,
hmm
and so this will help with that. I mean, at some point we'll probably have to finish that, but
help with how desperately we need to do it.
yeah, and the water's sort of running off in inappropriate ways.
hmm
So this is it's going to help, and it's going to help some of the flooding that you see in certain parts of
hmm
our city.
And it looks nicer. I
And
like
it's
walking
pretty,
by
yeah.
them. So some of our readers, of course, had to find the dark cloud on this. They said, what about all the trash gets thrown in them? Who's going to pick that up?
Well, one of the things that we're working on with this Clean and Safe Cities initiative is trying to figure out who has responsibility for the trash. And so we're thinking that the people, particularly those that have commercial businesses and don't have garbage cans for people to throw things away, have some responsibility. And in other communities, they have the major responsibility. And so we're going to be taking a look at how we handle that for the future. I've asked my staff to come up with a proposal for how we deal with trash, because it's not just there. It's probably actually even easier there because there are some people that care for it somewhat. But the drains and the trash, I don't know if you've walked. I know you walk all the time, but I don't know if you've noticed how the plastic cups, the leaves, the this or that get into our drain system. Well, other communities, people who live in front of those drains actually help to keep them clean. And I think
I always see Adam Marchand, the Westville Alder. He goes there. He cleans the leaves out of the the
and so
drain.
I think that we need to really think about how we get people to begin to see this as part of their responsibility.
I know it's a tough
too.
one because I always, and I've lost my courage since I've gotten older. I always wonder when I see someone walking by just throwing some trash out of a car or something, like, why'd you just do that?
Yeah.
And I talked to Becky Van Buren about it because she's the head of your parks department, and she's
Mhm.
working hard on this. And it's tough because government can't change the way, or maybe you can. I mean, you had that great ad in the 60s with the Native American chief with the tear, you're spoiling our environment. How do you change people's attitudes and practices of littering? Because, I mean, you could do a lot. My wife always points out you could clear the trash bans more,
Mhm.
so that people place throw out. But if we have more trash receptacles, will they use them, or will they also
I think
still
that
throw things?
I think they do. And in one of the places, I've noticed that a lot of the trash happens close to convenience stores and other places.
yeah.
And yes, it happens on residential streets too, but mostly the people on those residential streets will go and pick it up and clean it up.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't stay there. And in other cities, the responsibility for emptying those receptacles is the business.
That's it. And we do have business associations downtown,
Right,
and in Upper
and-
Chapel West, and
And Grand Avenue, and one of the things when I first became mayor, Grand Avenue was a lot more littered, and that business district started working with Marrakesh, and they have people out there. It's so much cleaner now because they've taken an interest. But I think that we've got to ask our business community, because a lot of people get that trash in their stores and they just drop it as they come out, to help us out. We need help.
this doesn't always happen, but we're running out of time before I got to ask you about a lot of this stuff. Real quick, Regional Leadership Council, you were a featured speaker. What was that all about?
Well, it was the leaders of our business community wanted to know what was going on in the city. You know, and it was really one of those discussions. We talked about all of the building that is going on, the apartments that indicate, you know, the district and other places that people are actually building and bringing businesses into our community. But then we still have some of the same social problems. So we talked about both of those.
And then Angela Bowens died. She was the Bowen Peters dance. I think she had a great obituary in the Times. Like, I didn't realize she was here until the early 80s. She had that dance school, Babs Girls. I always tell me every African-American girl went to that dance school. She was this regal sort of figure who taught a lot of people dance and other things as well. She closed up and became an out lesbian, divorced her husband, became a national spokesperson for lesbian rights. And they made this great movie about her. And she was on the West Coast, an academic, a writer. And but she had a real impact on New Haven.
She did.
And
she really did.
And then you also cut the ribbon on the firing range, and Giovanni Zinn still has his hearing because he was your guinea pig. He wanted to see, can I hear what it sounds like when they fire the guns? They moved it out of Sherman Parkway, where the neighbors were really plagued by that decades and organized, and you built a new one that's supposed to be state of the art. Any thoughts on the new firing range?
No, everyone was so excited. And, you know, the thought that I have is that the people in the neighborhood stuck to it. I know when I first became mayor, I met with them, and it was something that they thought was important, that they absolutely demanded, but they kept our feet to the fire. We got it done. It took a while, but we got it done. And they've all been around to see that whole process and to see how important their participation in that process is.
Gospel Fest revived.
Yes.
This weekend.
20th year anniversary.
There were a few years they didn't have it. They organized it again.
Yep.
And you like gospel music, don't you?
I love it.
Me too. Connecticut Big 3 Ball Out. In other words, you're doing that big tournament for the young people and young adults in front of City Hall this weekend.
We are doing that.
It's close the street. And it's 3-on-3, right?
3-on-3 basketball.
I don't remember that being big when we were young.
I don't either, but you know, I know that there was some kind of thrust to make it a part of the Olympics. So, yeah, and so it's going to be a lot of fun. So come on down. And
they've discovered water on Mars. So maybe there is intelligent life on Mars.
So maybe so.
Because I'm wondering sometimes if there's still intelligent life on Earth.
Well, that's a real quandary.
Okay.
Especially in Washington.
Well, we'll leave that quandary till next week. How's that?
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today on Mayor Monday at WNHH. Thanks so much to Mayor Harf for coming in here every Monday and filling us in. Thanks to Gateway Community College and Birch and Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. We know what it's like to be free. We just got to book our flight. So book it with us. Fly free all day and night here. WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.